to talk about college financial aid today. The official name of this session, Navigating the Fafsa and California DREAM Act application process. I'd like to welcome our panelists. I think we are still waiting on one more. Oh, no, Brianna's here. Great. Sorry, I had to do a little scrolling down. I would love, panelists, if we could start with some quick introductions. Tell us who you are, where you work, and what brings you to this space today. Miguel, if I could pass it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy weekend. Happy Saturday. My name is Miguel Molina. I am the current Associate Director of Programs with the Richmond Promise. I went to public schools here in the Richmond area, specifically Downer and Richmond High, and then I went to UC Davis for my undergrad, first generation college student, and pretty much since I finished my bachelor's degree, I've been working with a nonprofit here in Richmond called the Richmond Promise, which is a scholarship program that supports students from the city of Richmond that want to go to college. We support them to and through with the hopes of continuing to build a college going culture here in Richmond, California. So thank you, everybody, for joining today. I'll pass it over to Brianna.
Thanks, Miguel. So my name is Brianna Martinez. I'm actually a college counselor. I work for Aspire, a public charter school located in Richmond, actually near Hilltop Mall. I work with 9th through 12th grade, but more specifically, I do work really closely with 12th grade students in the matriculation process. So just all the ins and outs of the college application process. And now we're transitioning to doing financial aid. So we're working a lot on FAFSA, the California DREAM Act. So I'm pretty well versed in a lot of this. After I graduated from Aspire, so I'm actually an alumni, now working at my former high school. I went on to go study political science at UC Berkeley. Was really involved with college access programs and just giving back. And so this is sort of my role. And every year there are new updates. You learn more things, tricky situations. So we're here to best assist with all the knowledge and experience that we've had.
I'm so excited to talk to you both. So excited, in fact, that I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Sarah Sandu, and I'm today's facilitator. I'm a proud WCC USD graduate, a WCC USD parent, and over the last 15 years, I've worked in the higher education and K-12 space. I'm also a self-proclaimed financial aid nerd. So really excited to have the two of you here because I know there are so many questions about what financial aid is broadly, the applications themselves, and we are like 6 weeks out, I think, from one of the big deadlines. So a little bit of a time crunch, and I'm really thankful to both of you for being here on a Saturday to help families navigate this space. Before we get into like the nitty gritty of the applications themselves, would love to hear, either one can start. How did financial aid impact your personal story? Was it something that you needed to be able to go to college? What was your experience like navigating the process? And Brianna, maybe I'll start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Similar to Miguel, I'm also first generation. My parents immigrated from Mexico and from the Dominican Republic. So they've done a lot to kind of set the foundation for me. But I was the first one to go to an American high school and then to pursue college. I wasn't too sure what going to college meant when I went to high school. Aside from going to a college-going school, I knew it was important. I knew it would help me with my career and establishing myself, but I didn't understand what all these other factors would entail with going to college and being first generation. So senior year, I learned I had to apply to financial aid. But also senior year, I learned that as a student who went to a California public high school, that I would be eligible for something called the Cal Grant. And I knew that simply would help me a lot in paying for my tuition. But aside from just paying your tuition, there's all these other costs, like where are you going to live? How are you going to finance having your books? And so many other things too. So financial aid definitely was the reason why I was able to access and go to college. But more importantly, I think be able to finish and graduate with a bachelor's degree.
Thank you so much for sharing more about that. And we're gonna talk about Cal Grants later. Magic phrase there.
Mhm.
Miguel.
Yeah, it's very similar to what Brianna mentioned. When I was in high school, I was told about some of the different opportunities that existed, particularly for students from communities like Richmond that tend to be more working class. That there was going to be lots of financial aid, and I should just mainly worry about getting good grades so that I can qualify for things like the Cal Grant, and that later, when I was a senior, we could start thinking about other scholarships to apply to. And because my parents didn't really know much about how to get to college and how to finance that, I didn't really want to burden them too much. They always did let me know that if they had to pay out of pocket, that I could count on their support for a limited amount, of course. So for me, I really focused on applying to public schools because I knew that there were going to be the institutions that gave, at least here in California, for the most part, the most amount of financial aid. Really didn't venture into a lot of the schools that offer a lot of financial aid that are private schools that exist across the country. I just focused on the CSUs and the UCs, and I think I was always thinking about how am I going to finance housing, like living in the dorms, just off campus, coming home, and different factors like that definitely came into play, which is why ultimately I decided to go to a UC and Davis specifically because the distance wasn't too far. The area in Yolo County is pretty cheap, at least it was during the time that I was in college compared to like the Bay Area or LA. And the UC system does give a pretty generous package to students who come from working class families. So that's a big reason why I chose going to that school.
Thank you both for sharing more about how financial aid impacted your college journey or allowed it to happen. And Brianna, to your point, also to allow you to graduate. Really helpful information. Let's start just broadly. When we say financial aid, Miguel, what are we talking about? What falls under, what is financial aid? What types of financial aid exist?
Yeah, financial aid is basically support to help finance a college education from the perspective of a student. So financial aid, usually for most folks, comes publicly. It can also come privately. How we usually describe financial aid is apply to the FAFSA or apply to the California Dream Act, so you can see how much you qualify for grants, which is free money that you never have to pay back. If you apply for the FAFSA, you can sign up for work study, which if they award you work study, allows you the opportunity to work on campus with specific programs that are catered to provide working class students with the opportunity to gain employment, to structure it around their class schedule, and to pay them above minimum wage. And then the third form of financial aid is loans, and loans can be given to a student either by the school, by the federal government, by the state here in California for our documented students, and also private loans. The reason why loans are included in financial aid, at least the public ones, is because they come at a lower interest rate. Some of them, like the subsidized loans, do not have to be paid back till 6 months after a student graduates from college. So that's the reason why they're included, because they're supposed to be the better option as opposed to going to like a private bank and asking for a loan there. But I pretty much is financial aid. Those are the three main branches. Get grants, again, which is free money. Work study, the opportunity for the student to work when they're in college for a decent job on campus. And lastly, federal loans, which come with lower interest rates.
Got you. And the way we access the way we access financial aid is by completing the acronyms we hear a lot. We hear FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, or the CADAA in California, which is the California Dream Act application. Brianna, can you tell us who is eligible to complete the FAFSA and the Dream Act application?
Yeah, I think it's really important to start with you fill out one or the other.
Yep.
So for students who are documented, meaning you have a social security number, you're a citizen of the US, then you're eligible to apply for FAFSA. FAFSA, again, like Sarah mentioned, it's federal student aid. And that's why you have to be a citizen to access that federal aid. And kind of like how Miguel was just saying too, CADAA allows for undocumented students here in California specifically to access other aid, even though they won't be able to necessarily access that federal aid. So if you are documented, you have a social security number, a citizen of the US, you're eligible to apply for FAFSA. Now, if you don't have a social security number, then you would default to the CADAA, to the California Dream Act application. And then that way you could still access like the Cal Grant, which is still generous enough to support with paying off tuition. And yeah.
Brianna, when I have talked to families about the Dream Act application in particular, I think that there is confusion sometimes around if it's related to DACA or not. Can you clarify here, do you need to have DACA status to be able to complete the Dream Act application?
So DACA itself is kind of just a form for citizenship. So that's just an opportunity you can take advantage of. Now, to be eligible for the California Dream Act, you have to make sure you are AB 540 eligible. AB 540 was just a legislation that was passed that essentially says that if you are a student who has attended a public high school for at least a minimum of 3 years, now there are other caveats to that, such as like you can also have attended a public high school in California for also elementary or middle school as well, as long as there's an accumulation of 3 years, then you are eligible to apply with the CADAA. But you don't necessarily have to be a DACA, like a DACA recipient or actively seeking that citizenship. But yeah.
And I think it's important to also remind people that the two systems don't speak to each other in that way. So filling out a DACA application is not the same. They don't talk to each other. So thank you for clarifying that. It's also a question, I'm going to bring it up early in the chat because I think it's a really important one. Miguel, I'm going to take this to you, and Brianna, feel free to chime in after. Should you still fill out the FAFSA if you believe your family income is not going to qualify your student to receive a Pell Grant or a Cal Grant?
Yes, you definitely should. It's actually going to become a graduation requirement soon in the state of California. So your children will be expected to complete it regardless. It's also very important because even if you, at this point, the highest you can make to qualify for Cal Grant for a family of 5 or above is $135K a year. You can still qualify for the middle class scholarship, which is financial aid that both the CSU and the UC system offers here in California, which can cover at the moment up to 40% of the tuition. So that's still something. At the same time, in order for a school to find out your income and make their own financial aid afford package for every single student, they need to have a student to complete a FAFSA or a California Dream Act. So let's say if your student goes to UC Berkeley and the UC system, like I said, does come with more financial aid, if the student who gets admitted doesn't have a FAFSA on file, the school won't know what their income is, so automatically will not award the student any financial aid at all. As opposed to, even if they make over the Cal Grant limit, they may qualify for the middle class scholarship, or they can also qualify for federal loans if the student may want to take them out at one point during that given school year. So yeah, it's very important to fill out the FAFSA, and also many scholarships may ask for a FAFSA report just to verify that the student is completing financial aid. So it's just going to become something that's going to be more mandatory as we move forward. And then even for students who are going to community college, is even more important because there's a lot of financial aid at that level. Specifically here in West Contra Costa, we have the Contra Costa College Community District. We have Diablo Valley College, Los Medanos College, and Contra Costa College. And students can take advantage of the Ft3 program that exists within these schools, which stands for first time, full time for free. So as long as the student completes a FAFSA for California Dream Act, they enroll full time at these schools. they get their first 2 years of classes or tuition waived, regardless of their income. But they do have to have a FAFSA or California Dream Act on file, and they have to commit again and being enrolled full time and maintaining at least a 2.0 GPA or above. So very important to still fill it out. You can still get financial aid, and always might as well ask. Nothing hurts to ask and then see how much you get, right? Versus as opposed to like being scared to apply and not finding out what could have been offered to you at different schools.
Brianna, anything to add to that?
I think just really emphasizing, like, fill it out. You don't know, you may assume maybe you won't get financial aid, or you're scared that you're only going to be offered loans, but you truly don't know what you're going to be offered. Situations, because the both applications will ask for the previous year's like tax information. Your income status, your financial status may change within that year. I think a lot has impacted a lot of our communities with the pandemic. And so it's understandable if you are just really worried that the finances of a college are going to be a barrier to being able to access that pathway. But just really just take the chance to apply. And you're investing a couple of minutes, maybe if it may take longer for some other people, but it's really worth it. You get information back to see how much you're expected to contribute. You get information as to what you may be eligible for, but your schools will work with you. You just have to kind of take those first couple steps.
Both of you have referenced loans that are essentially like activated by completing these applications, and these federal loans in particular are at a lower interest rate than some of these private loans. Would you have access to these loans if you did not complete the application?
No.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure that is out there. I think that is something that is commonly just not as widely understood. So completing the applications is a good thing to do. And as Miguel mentioned, it will become mandatory starting next school year for all California 12th graders to complete either the FAFSA or the California Dream Act application. I mentioned earlier, we are like, I think 6 weeks away from the March 2nd deadline. What are other important dates to know related to financial aid? So if I'm a parent, I have my calendar out right now. What do I need to mark down, Brianna, so that I don't forget, my student doesn't forget a critical step, I don't forget a critical step?
So the March 2nd deadline is the priority deadline. So it doesn't mean that if you don't meet the March 2nd deadline, it's end all be all. You want to maybe treat it as so. Because if you do and you make the March 2nd deadline, that means all funds will make sure that they're prioritized to those who applied by then. Now, if funds for some reason are exhausted by then, or there are less funds, then that can impact how much financial aid you can access after the March 2nd deadline. Now, the second date you should keep in mind is June 30th. So after March 2nd, if you have, and so that's the filing priority deadline, right? Making sure you have submitted. Now, if you made a mistake, you forgot to include information, maybe you typed in a number that was incorrect, that does not actually reflect a parent's W-2 or 1040 form, and you want to make those corrections, you can still make corrections after the March 2nd deadline. So that's really important to know, that you want to make sure you're making corrections, that it's processed, that you've made sure you've noted where you want your financial aid application to be sent to what schools you're applying to or interested in attending by June 30th latest. Schools that you're applying to, 4 years, 2 years, or even any vocational trade schools, they may want to have that way before June 30th though, so they can give you enough time to really evaluate that financial aid package you receive from them. So my kind of rule of thumb is apply, make sure you're filed by March 2nd. Many four-year universities and private schools require you to have made a final decision by May 1st. So making sure that you've made those corrections if you need to by May 1st, but ultimately, I know for FAFSA, your ultimate deadline is June 30th.
All right. Miguel, any other things to be aware of? What steps should a student take before each of those deadlines?
Well, I mean, first, get help. It's not something we expect you to do by yourself. So definitely reach out to your school and see what resources are being offered. Some schools do direct support in the classroom. They're very intentional about that work. Others, you may need to go to the career center, or if you're part of a college access program, I'm sure they'll support you with that. But you definitely, if you're thinking of going to for university, please fill it out by March 2nd. And even if you're thinking of going to community college or a CTE program, it doesn't hurt to just get it done by then, because there are scholarships that are due in March and April that may require you to have completed the FAFSA California Dream Act. So just get it out of the way while everybody's working on it. Yeah, so I think those are the big things. That's why we stress March 2nd so much, because right now it's a hotbed. There's a lot of interest from staff at school sites to help students with these forms. When we get to April and May, folks like Brianna and myself, we're focusing more on identifying which students need to apply to community college, and helping the four-year bound students pick and choose what school they're going to commit to. So at that point, it limits the ability we have to help other students with their FAFSA or their California Dream Act in those months as we approach graduation day. So that's why right now is like the perfect time to get started on it, and just make sure that if like you need to provide your student with information, personal information, that all of that information, like Sarah mentioned, is confidential. So don't be afraid to take advantage of these programs, because every year there's over $1 billion that gets left untouched at the federal level because students just don't apply. I believe only I think under 50% across the country apply every single year. So that's very little if you think about it. When you take into perspective the amount of students that attend schools across the country.
I think another common thing we hear is that I have to have this year's taxes done to fill it out, which is not true. To be able to complete the financial aid application that is appropriate for you, use your 2020 tax return. So don't think you're, okay, I gotta hurry up and finish my taxes this year and use that. You actually use the prior year for the award year that you are applying. So between the two of you, I'm sure you've helped so many students go through this application. Brianna, I'm going to start with you. Where do students struggle the most when it comes to actually getting to the point where they can hit submit? What sections are like the roadblocks, or the questions that are the roadblocks?
I mean, I truly think it can be any and every section. Even as early as the first demographic section, where it's really just asking for a lot of your biographical information, like your first name, your last name, social security on the FAFSA. You wouldn't be asked for social security on the CADAA. But you need to make sure you do know like your legal name. If you have or have not used your middle initial, you want to reference birth certificates, any legal documents of what like your name is, right? I think the next section, like when it comes to the parent information, being able to identify like who are your biological parents. Sometimes, we have families that may not have a second parent. We have families that are not like biological parents, maybe foster parents, maybe adoptive parents. But the applications are going to ask for your biological parents. And so you want to be able to have some form or access to that information. So really just access to legal documents, I think, tends to be a big barrier if you are in a more little complex, challenging situation. And ultimately, I think the financial documents also tends to be, I think, the biggest barrier with actually being able to submit. You may have been able to complete every other section, but if you don't know your parents' income, if your parents are married, they file independently, separately, married, jointly, right? You want to be able to have all those, and sometimes maybe we lose those. And so it's important to be able to access them even if you have lost them. Maybe finding like a tax transcript, which you can do online. It's kind of hard to do it over the phone at this time because of the pandemic. But yeah, I think those are kind of like my main top areas. And the last thing with FAFSA and CADAA, FAFSA, you need to have a parent PIN. Your parent also needs to make a FAFSA if they have a social security as well. So if your parent has a social security, they'll be able to create like their own FAFSA account, but that's only used to sign at the very end. Sometimes we get held back because we haven't been able to make our parents' account just yet. So we want to make sure that even though the financial aid application is based on the student, so it's based on you as a senior, based on you as a student, what your status is, your parent is still involved in this process, not only having to use their information, but also just that final piece where they have to sign off. And on the CADAA, it's a parent PIN, and similarly, they just have to create like a 4-digit PIN.
Thank you. Miguel, are there other roadblocks you'd point to or pitfalls that stop people from actually completing the application? Either one, either the FAFSA or the DREAM Act application.
I think kind of touching on Brianna mentioned with documents is having access to that. There could be a little bit of miscommunication when the student tries to ask the student, like, what is it they need? And then the parents understanding, like, what is it for? Because, like we're asking students in the class to bring all the sensitive information, and parents want to be part of the fun too. But because they can't be
called it fun.
fun, because they can't be in the classroom, of course, especially now with COVID. So that gap right there, that's, I think it's important for like students and educators to work together so that they can explain it adequately to parents, so that they can feel confident enough to let their child use sensitive information like social security numbers and tax information. So I know that's like a huge barrier. I mean, there's always like evening events that happen throughout the school year, but a lot of the times parents can't make it because they're one-off events. So I would always just encourage parents, if they really want to learn more about the process, that they can meet with folks like myself, but that they should definitely trust their child to complete these tasks on their own, because eventually they're going to have to renew them every single year. And it's important for them to learn how to do it themselves. Because I work with many students, and sometimes their parents do everything for them. Like they created the FSAD for the student. They created the accounts for the students to apply for college. And that's kind of cool. Like, I wish I had parents that had that much knowledge, but at the same time, they're going to be the ones that are either 18 or turning 18 soon. And they're going to have to redo these forms every single year on their own. So it's better that they learn it, just trust them with the information. If a student ever takes out a loan, legally can only be in the name of the student, not the parent. In order for somebody to take out a loan in the name of a parent, the parent has to sign legally. So parents don't be worried that your student's going to put you directly in debt. If anything, they'll put themselves in debt. But of course, that's up to every individual to pay back, or trust me, Uncle Sam is going to come knocking. But yeah, just have confidence in them to at least apply for the FAFSA and see how much aid they can get and then go from there.
What would you say to a parent who says, I'm not comfortable or I'm scared? Let's be real. Like, I'm scared to give my information, to reveal something about my family situation while completing these forms. What would you say to a parent to help them understand?
Yeah, I mean, don't let fear be a detriment to your child's education, right? I know there's a lot of immigrant families like my parents who started out here at the US, coming from another country, and they were afraid of even taking out a credit card at the beginning, or going to the bank and stuff like that. But first of all, your child has a right to know their social security number. It's theirs, especially if they're a U.S. citizen or resident. Like, they should be able to use that. If they don't have access to one, luckily in the state of California, we have the CADAA, and let them take advantage of that, because other kids in those situations in states like Louisiana may not have the same opportunity. So don't hinder your child from being able to take advantage of that. Disclosing information like your income, I know that could be challenging to see your son or daughter see how much you make in a given year, but I think it's important for them to know that, right? So that they're aware, if my parents don't make enough money, I am going to be eligible for more financial aid. But I also have to be aware that if I go to school, I can't like expect them to help me with too much out of out of pocket, right? Like with supplies and stuff like that. And I think it also can serve as motivation for them. Be like, I know that if I want to get ahead and help my parents when they're older, then I need to get an education, right? Or I need to find a sustainable career. Yeah, just don't be afraid. And there's y'all already doing enough as being a parent in these troubling times. And if you see that your child is motivated to apply to college and apply to financial aid, don't take that opportunity away from them, right? At least let them try out college. And trust me, if they like it, they'll stick with it. And even if they don't, they'll push through. And if it isn't for them, then at least they realized and they gave themselves that opportunity to expose themselves to that. But just don't let them miss out on that opportunity to attain education, because that's something really valuable that nobody can take away from you, right? Like whether or not they end up being an engineer, doctor, they got an education. That's something they'll always have, and it'll help them open new doors wherever they go in life. So I think it's important to not let fear hold us back.
Thank you so much for sharing that, like very straightforward advice. Brianna, do you have anything to add if you encounter a student, you're working with one of your students and they're like, my parents are just like super scared. What is some advice you would give them, or to the parents directly?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it as well. Just reassuring families that this information is kept confidential. It's not going to be shared. It's used. This legal information is used for the purposes of being able to identify specific people, individuals, to make sure that the money does go to the right place. And so I think maybe that's also another level of discomfort, is just not knowing, I'm going to put this on the internet, like, where is this going to go? But, these are federal, state websites that will keep your information secure. So, don't let that hold you back either from what Miguel was saying, just like these potential opportunities. And moving forward will be also legally mandated as well.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for that. I was actually at a training yesterday from the California Student Aid Commission, which, for those of you listening, the Csac is the 500th acronym that we'll throw out today. They are the largest. They are the body that administers state financial aid in California. They had a great graphic at the beginning of their presentation, and they said, try and think of financial aid as a cycle, not just a one and done thing. You don't just submit the application and you're done with financial aid. It's more of a kind of like a process. So once a student has submitted their financial aid, Brianna, what comes next for them?
So once you've submitted your financial aid application, there's a wait period. You have to wait for it to get processed. You have to wait for you to also just find out, what schools have accepted you. And then there's just kind of like that cross collaboration, right? Like the school accepts you, you've done your financial aid, and now the financial aid application has gone to the school that has accepted you. So long that, when you filled out your financial aid application, you listed all the schools you applied to. And then they start working towards creating your financial aid package. So I think another thing to keep in mind after you've submitted your financial aid, here in California, you want to also create your Csac account, because that'll also be a way for you to access and be able to tell, right, the state of California where you want that Cal grant to go to. So there's quite a few things you want to keep in mind to do, but I think those are maybe the Bigger things that you want to keep in mind is creating a CSAC account, being able to link who you are federally, if you're doing the FAFSA rate, or in the state with your CADAA, and then also that Cal Grant account. And then once your schools have the information that they need, they'll start processing financial aid packages. You may even hear back from a school with a financial aid package, but not even know just yet if you've been accepted or not. That has happened quite a few times. It can be misleading because if you receive a financial aid package, but then you get denied, you're kind of left like, well, why would you, tell me that I got money, but you're not accepting me? So you really just want to make sure that you're hearing like the last word from the schools. Whatever financial aid package you do receive isn't like a final package. Let's say when you're filling out your financial aid application, you've indicated you did not want to be considered for work study. At the time, you're thinking, like maybe it's not feasible, maybe it's not within my means of being a full-time student navigating the campus and to add on an extra load of work. But then you realize your financial aid package is still going to require you to have an out-of-pocket cost. But if that out-of-pocket cost is maybe a couple $1,000s, like let's say $1,000, maybe you can make a correction on your FAFSA. You can talk to the school about work study, and they can work that into your package. And now you no longer have to owe the school $1,000 in August. Rather, you're going to be working at the library a couple hours every week until the end of December, and then you just don't have that bill. So there's quite a few things, I think. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that was great. Can you remind us again? So I'm submitting it before March 2nd for priority consideration and for Cal Grant consideration. If I mess up on my phone, if I made a mistake, did something wrong, how long do I have to make that correction?
After you submitted it the March 2nd deadline? Yeah. Okay. So I would say as soon as you can, like as soon as you made a mistake, I would say as soon as your financial aid application is processed, and you'll receive an email, you'll receive notifications that it has been processed. You want to look at your student aid report. Your student aid report will be essentially a summary of the entire financial aid application. Ideally, you take a look at that before you hit submit, but it's totally fine if you submit and then you realize afterwards that you've made a mistake, you forgot information, you miscalculated something. Do that ASAP. When you make those changes, it does take 2 to 3 weeks for the application itself, so the CADAA or the FAFSA, to make those changes and process those. And then it may take another 2 to 3 weeks for the school itself to repackage your financial aid package. So we're looking at like 4 to 6 weeks of like a timeline of you to hear back again, like a new financial aid package. If we're talking 1 to 2 months, you submitted in March, you need to make a final decision of what school you want to apply to by May 1st. You really want to make those changes, I would say, by the end of March, as early as the end of March, right? As late as mid-April, because you won't have a lot of time to really make a secure financial informed decision by May 1st.
I appreciate that. Miguel, I want to ask you, because Brianna is in 9 through 12. She's got our high school babies. They graduate. They head your way. You get to see them. I know you do some work in the high schools, but you mainly see college. You support college students. And what are some? So you get them. They've submitted their financial aid application. They're awaiting their award letters. What are some other steps that students miss or ignore once they've submitted their application? What have you seen commonly in your role?
The biggest things probably is like Brianna mentioned, after you finish a FAFSA, it takes about a week to get an email saying it's been processed. And then even if it says processed, there still might be some information that might have been missed, and it actually pops up on your homepage. I'll let you know, like when you look at your student aid report, which is a summary of your FAFSA, It says, by the way, you, and like in writing, but people don't really read it. It says, you don't qualify for loans or for Pell Grant because you didn't report family information, or this figure looks a little funky. Can you use the IRS data retrieval tool instead? So it already lets you know some error codes. That doesn't affect anything to do with the government. What it affects is when the school gets your FAFSA report. Let's say you got into UC Berkeley, UCLA, right? And they see these errors, that's gonna be a red flag for them. So when you get into the school and you're trying to see an estimate of how much awards they're gonna give you, they'll let you know that they can't process that for you until you fix that. So after you submit your FAFSA and it's been processed, still look at it, glance at it. If there's anything that's funky, make sure you modify it in time so that it doesn't hold you back when you want to view your awards for your schools. Another step that students may miss is, particularly if they want to go to a UC or a CSU, is they also, after they complete their FAFSA, they want to make sure to create what's called a web grants account. So it's another portal to be able to view their Cal Grant eligibility. So this is another step that's taken. And then on there, you actually get to choose what school you want the Cal Grant to be sent to, as long as the school is in California and it's a four-year university. So that's another step that sometimes I see students miss. And then when we get to like the summer, they're like, or like August specifically, they're like, my Cal Grant didn't get sent to San Jose State. What happened? And then I go and I see, and I'm like, let's take a look at your FAFSA. Okay, San Jose State's there. Let's take a look at your Cal Grant through web grants. Did you choose San Jose State? And I was like, oh, like UC Merced is still a school that's chosen. I was like, okay, we need to switch that, right? But that's little things that we could be doing in the spring, right after the student knows what school they're going to go to. Now, unfortunately, a lot of that is kind of like not forgotten, but a lot of the times we stress so much March 2nd FAFSA that we forget about the web grants, or we forget about making sure we review students' FAFSA one more time, even after it's been processed. So just important for the student to be proactive and check that on their end, but also if they're like unsure, it's okay to go up to a staff member at school and ask for help. So that you don't get your financial aid late. Like it will arrive, it's just you'd rather get it before, so you don't have to worry about paying out of pocket at the beginning.
So if I'm a parent and I'm listening to both of you, and my child has submitted either the FAFSA or the DREAM Act application, my next step is to yell at them until they open up or until they create a web grants portal or an account, essentially. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, you can give them a week. You're gonna take a little break, but get that web grants in. I think it's important, probably like a week after you finish, after your FAFSA has been processed, go ahead and create it. To create a web grants account, it's very similar to creating a FSA ID, like a FAFSA account. Like you'll have to link an email. Always use personal email. Don't let your student use school email because that's going to be discontinued. So make sure they have
one more time.
Yes, school emails will be discontinued. So make sure your children use their personal email, and preferably something that's more professional, like their first and last name with some numbers. And yeah, again, we have so many students that apply to like our program, and then they try to reaccess their FAFSA, and their WCC schools email is gonna not be there no more. So then we have to go through calling in them and then resetting it and all that. So just stress that.
So preferably don't use my wildchild06
yeah,
yahoo.com
like
email.
Yeah.
Maybe creating an email specifically for this whole process that I know I will check might be a way to go.
Yeah, so that's definitely very useful. And then after their FAFSA has been processed and good to go, then you could remind them to complete their web grants account, just so that they have that ready for when they get accepted. They can view if they're eligible for it, and then B, once they're ready to pick if they're going to go to a school in California, they have to make sure they update that on their web grants. And then just one last thing in regards to web grants and FAFSA and California Dream Act, because they go together. There is a portion in the FAFSA and the California Dream Act where a student is able to add schools that they want this report to be sent out to. We always recommend that the first school that a student adds that has at the top of the list, if they apply to a UC, make sure that the school at the first school they add is a UC. And then the CS, and then after you add all the UCs, add the CSUs, and then the privates, and then the community colleges. If the student didn't apply to any UCs, but they did apply to CSUs, then start with the CSUs, the public schools first, and then you go into the privates and the community colleges. That way, when the student gets the notification whether or not they will receive the web grants, automatically the system, if you apply to a UC, it'll let you know the max amount you got for a UC. And then if you apply to a UC and you put that at the top, it'll give you the amount that's maximum for them, because they're different. And if you added San Francisco State, but you want to go to Cal and you got into Cal and you're wondering, why does my web grant say 5,742? I thought I could get more if I go to UC. Well, it's because of that. It's not that you're not going to get the full amount. It's just that because you had a UC at the top, it's going to limit to the max limit for that type of institution.
Thank you for sharing that. I have heard students freak out when they are asked to verify, ask for some form of verification. I learned yesterday at this training that I was at, that was actually very specific to the DREAM Act application, that the California Student Aid Commission selects randomly 20% of applications to be verified. Brianna, what does it mean when a student is asked to verify an application? Should I freak out? If I'm a parent, what do I do?
You may naturally freak out, even if I say don't freak out. And that's totally okay. I think after you freaked out though, don't sit in that for too long. You want to look at what those next steps are. Verification can look differently for different people. More commonly than not, they will ask for a tax transcript. So something that you can obtain online. However, you want to look at specifically what it is that they're asking for. Maybe they just want a scanned document. They want to confirm maybe something else that you've reported. And so you just want to make sure that you have access to this, which is why it's important to have on hand these legal documents as you're filling it out. You don't want to just guess like, oh yeah, I own a business. We make about $1,000 of profit from our business or side hustle or whatever it is. You want to make sure that you're going by whatever is legally already stated. And so if you do get followed up on like this side business, you have the documents and you know you reported the accurate number. So I think that's kind of my answer to that.
Thank you. Miguel, anything to add to that? Oh, you're on mute.
I did see there's a question in Spanish in the chat that was asked around how do you gain access to your account after like 5 years. I think the best way to go about that is to contact the FAFSA hotline. They do have a number. They have it where it's automated at the beginning. You can do English or Spanish. But I always call whenever a student needs to reset their account. So what you'll go through is you'll have a representative talk to you over the phone while you try to access your FAFSA. And if you forgot your password, your challenge questions, everything, basically they'll just ask some personal information like your social security number, your date of birth, your address to verify your account. And then you'll be able to regain access to it. They're pretty much available Monday. There you go, during the week. Just bear with the automated system at the beginning. But eventually, once you ping some of the numbers to the questions that they ask you, you'll be able to talk to a live representative. So it's okay. It's been done before. When I graduated from college, I didn't do the FAFSA for a year or two, and I forgot my account, and I needed to reaccess it to create presentations for the Richmond Promise. And they just asked me personal information, and then they were able to give me basically a new password that they created for me to reaccess my information.
Thank you for checking on the chat. I see another one, Miguel. I'm going to come back to you for this one. Brianna, also, if you know the answer to this, this is specific to 529 accounts. These are college savings accounts that parents can open. Do either of you know offhand if those accounts need to be reported as part of the financial information provided when you're applying for financial aid? My gut says yes, but I will defer to.
There is a series of questions after if you use the IRS data retrieval tool, you'll automatically transfer the gross income and also the tax that the family had to pay for that given year. Some information will be automatically transferred, some may not. Even if the folks don't use their data retrieval tool, there's going to be a series of questions that ask you about things like combat pay, tax deductibles, supplemental income. Just read through the questions carefully. And one of the questions will be that specifically, how much money might have been set aside for that. And it's important to report that so that the school can take it into consideration, because omitting information can disqualify the student from receiving financial aid for that given year. So it's important to just disclose as much information that's available. When you're going through those questions, if you're having difficulty, I would always just recommend reaching out to folks who know a little bit more about financial aid to help guide you through that process. But yes, there is a set question on the FAFSA for that and the California Dream.
Thank you. I want to wrap up with one last preset question, and then we'll get to more of these that are in the chat. So pivoting kind of from the application process itself to now paying for, now I'm accepted, I've gotten my award letter, I'm in college. What are Brianna, some of the unexpected college costs that come up that I might not have thought about before?
I think we often hear in the news and whatnot, the cost of college is rising in terms of tuition. That's a major, maybe about 50% of your cost, but the cost of attendance to actually be a college student, it can vary a little bit. In my case, and you can also Google, if your dream school, let's say, is UCLA, you can Google UCLA's cost of attendance, right? They will estimate that in an academic year, you need about $1,500 for books. When I attended UC Berkeley, my estimated cost was similar. I can be honest and say I probably spent about $500 over the course of 5-6 years of my undergrad career of my books. I didn't spend $1,500 every single year, even though that's what UC Berkeley estimated that I would pay. Your cost of attendance includes books. It will include if you need a laptop. It'll include all the essentials that you need to thrive as a student. Your children are growing, right? Students are growing. They don't want to wear what they were wearing in 10th grade. They want a new wardrobe. If they're commuting, they need to take into account that insurance. They need to take into account gas prices that are rising, right? These are all different costs that contribute to how much it actually costs to be a college student outside of what the university is going to charge you for the cost of actually learning. These are all costs, or some of those other costs that are varying. It's really up to you how much you can bring it down, or in a case of an emergency. I know during my second year of college, I had my laptop stolen. And so that was an unexpected cost that it sucked. It was right before my finals.
Oh, no.
But it was an unexpected cost that I wasn't ready for. Even though I knew I should have been ready for it to some extent, because things unexpectedly happen all the time. And so I was fortunate enough that I was able to use something called an emergency loan through the university. So something that's specific from the university to its students. It may have a shorter amount of a turnaround of how much you need to pay back. Maybe it has a different interest rate. It's not a federal loan. It's just coming straight from your school to help assist with offsetting that cost. So truly, the cost of attendance can vary, but it's great to go off of what the school is going to estimate The school estimates those costs based on historically what maybe students have reported. It's an average, right? So it can even go higher than that. If you're living on campus, you are going to be accounting for the cost of living in the dorms. It's going to have an outrageous price of $14,000. But I like to tell my students, those $14,000 for living in a dorm not only accounts that your dorm is furnished, it does also accounts for, you know, like you have light, you have utilities, you have Wi-Fi, you get your trash taken out, right? Like these are all things that maybe we're not necessarily thinking of as like immediate costs because we don't see it right away, but those $14,000 actually goes a long way. It's accounting for also majority of your meals throughout the week, not all of them, but majority of them. And so if you are going to a school that's far, if your student's planning to go, 7 hours away, or even if you are going to a school like UC Davis, which is still fairly nearby, you want to be prepared for when all your friends want to go out and get pizza. That's still a cost that you didn't think you would have, but you're going to accumulate if you're going to go get pizza almost every Friday night, right? So those are just costs that I think maybe we don't think about immediately, but they will add up.
I want to add to your point about, like, of course, you don't want to wear the same clothes you were wearing in high school. You're a college student now, you want some different clothes, but also just if your student opts to go to a college that has an entirely different climate, you then are looking at, if it's snowing or it rains like crazy, we're talking about rain gear, snow gear, weatherproof backpacks that maybe in California we don't always need to buy because it's nicer weather over here. But just things that I appreciate you for naming things that we maybe don't think about. So Miguel, the flip to that question, I'm going to come over to you. Where are some areas to optimize savings then? If we know that these are some things that might come up, how can we be a little more budget conscious when we're paying for college or making decisions around that?
I think, well, there's the student and the parent perspective. Obviously, the parent has money saved up. I would say that the parent can help with whatever they feel comfortable with. But I think from the student, they could do a lot themselves too. The summer before they go to college is a wonderful time to take advantage of community college classes. They want to get ahead in their unit count, but they can also work a bit to have some money. I always kind of view where, like, as a student, use the Cal grant and the Pell grant and your scholarships to pay for tuition and help you with housing. When you look at personal expenses and books, work, and pay for that, because everybody I knew in college was working. Trust me, like everybody, even like the rich kids would work. The ones that are a little bit more well off, like, use that money to go out, to buy books, to buy supplies, to buy the clothes. If you want to go on spring break and have the time of your life, you finance that yourself. Make sure you have the grades so that you get the Cal grant to pay for the tuition. And when it comes to the housing, if for some reason you're a little low or you want to have a little bit more extra money on the side, it's not the end of the world if you decide to take out a subsidized loan. If they offer you $5,000, for example, you don't have to take out the full amount. You can take out just a couple, put that in your bank account and have it there for an emergency, like Brianna mentioned, right? In case something happens. That could be a different way to help you budget. I think I always, at least from a student perspective, first gen, I try to not add as many things on my parents' plate because I already knew that they were helping me out with pay for my rent after my first year of college. So I was like, if I'm gonna be doing if I'm gonna want anything on the side, I'm gonna procure it myself and just take advantage of working or doing internships to also get experience. It's important. I don't expect parents to pay for every single thing that the student accrues, but if they want to, then go for it. You're lucky if you're a student and you have a parent like that. But it's okay to take out a loan to build your credit. It's okay to take out a credit card. It's okay to get a job when you're in college. Hopefully more as a sophomore as opposed to a freshman, but if you need to, it's okay to balance that and have your own side money in case case anything happens. But from the perspective of now as a high school student, the best thing you can do is apply to scholarships and apply to as many as possible, because you can get even more money on top of what the government is going to give you and your family. So that money, I would say, use that money to save it up, put it in your bank account as you go into your first year of college, because you probably don't want to work your first year of college. So that could be kind of like your savings, your piggy bank for the first year. Or if you're a workaholic, then go for it, and maybe you can invest that money. Maybe you can invest the money, start investing it in things like a Roth IRA or stocks if you're into that, right? It doesn't hurt to get started earlier. But yeah, I think it's always just being smart with your time. You want to make sure that you are doing school, but that you're also working to some extent. At least for me, it was more of a distraction. I got work study. I was able to tutor ELD students in Davis. So it's pretty fun, because I never expected to meet ELD students in Davis at the high school level. And I was able to work with students and translate things for them and get paid like almost $20 an hour, and only like 8 hours a week when I wanted to. So it was really, really chill. And I really, really valued that experience because it motivated me to go to school. And a lot of my friends were working like in the gym. So they like working there, or they were working at the financial aid office, which is pretty cool because they got to see firsthand how that impacts students, right? And some of my other friends had more chill jobs like the computer lab or tutoring college students. So there's a lot of cool opportunities through work study. Take advantage of it, because my peers that didn't have work study had to work like at Starbucks or how to work at like In-N-Out, which is a lot more time consuming, strenuous, and stressful than doing a work study job. Because work study, most of the time, you're just chilling, to be honest.
Well, they are limited though. That is something.
Yeah, they are limited. But if you are awarded, take advantage of it, because
yes,
students would fight for that, to have that privilege to use the work study.
I'm going to ask our tech support to throw up the slide of some opportunities coming up in the coming weeks to get more help for your financial aid applications. But as they're doing that, I would love to ask the audience, are there any questions that are remaining? I saw Brianna was answering some questions in the chat. Thank you so much. But if there is a question that has come up for you as our wonderful panelists have been talking, please drop it in the chat. And as those come in, I just want to highlight a couple things. Miguel and the Richmond Promise team will be supporting with Fafsa and California Dream Act application completion support on the 29th, Saturday the 29th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. To make an appointment for that one-on-one support, you can contact Maribel Lopez. Maribel will drop her contact information there. She will help make sure you get set up with an appointment slot. And I hear they are in high demand. So if you know you're going to want some one-on-one support to finish that application, please make an appointment as soon as possible. If you just want more general information, similarly to what we covered here, but you want to go a little more in depth, there are 2 more info sessions to catch in the coming weeks. We have a session on February 3rd that is hosted by Go Public Schools and the Richmond Promise, February 3rd at 5:30, February 11th at 9:30 a.m. for all you early risers. And then we are again hosting an expert panel on Wednesday, February 16th. So trying to give families as many opportunities as possible to get questions answered right up until that March 2nd deadline.